welcome back to my channel. Today we're creating a faux snow globe using the Nordic Santa and Reindeer, which is part of the Christmas Part 1 release available now in the Scrap and Cottage. I'll also be using a Spellbinders Arches die to create my card base. Here's a look at the Nordic Santa and Reindeer. I did Copic color all of my images off camera. This is a solid die, so I cut it from white cardstock and then do the coloring. I thought the Snowman with Country Shed, which was from last year's release, went perfect with my scene. I have the winter pine and birch trees. I'll be using that tallest pine tree. And finally, I'm going to add a little bit of moonlight to my sky and use the Campin out sun and moon. I've cut 2 pieces of white cardstock using the largest arch die, and I'm going to score one of them. That will be the back of my card, and this will be my card base. Off camera, I took the largest, and then I took a smaller size of the arch to create a frame for my shaker card because we are creating a snow globe. So over the frame, I am adding a little bit of double-sided tape, and then I'll use my tape runner across the top of the arch. It was just a little bit easier to go ahead and add a little bit more adhesive. I cut a piece of acetate using that largest die. I did line this up in my Misti. This was the easiest way for me to align this. Because I do have that tape runner at the very top, I'm going to adhere that portion first, and then once I get that aligned the way I want to, I can remove the release paper from my double-sided tape and finish adhering the rest of that acetate. So this is going to be the window of my shaker card. So I need to add some foam tape to the back of this. I do have this 1/8" foam tape. This is from scrapbook.com, and I buy them in sheets, so you can see that it all comes on that sheet, and I just remove it. It's perfect for these shaker cards. I really like that 1/8". It gets into some of the smaller spots. I will add 2 layers of this because I do want to make sure that all of my little bits and pieces that I add to the inside are going to shake really freely. I'm going to add part of my scene to the inside of my card and part of my scene to the outside of that acetate. So it's going to give it a really dimensional look. This added foam tape is just going to, as I mentioned, add a little bit more space between the back of my card and the acetate window, and that allows the shaker pieces to move more freely. I'm going to be using some glitter on the inside of this and some sequins, so I wanted to make sure that my snow globe was shaking freely. And here's the last piece. Moving on to my background, I'm going to use Prized Ribbon Distress Oxide ink. I'll add it to the upper portion of this dome. This is going to be the piece that's going to go behind the acetate. And so I'm going to add that prized ribbon, which I really like this easy combination. I'll leave a little bit of white space at the bottom for there to be some snow on the ground. And then I'll go around the edges to darken up the sky to make it more like a night scene using Distress ink. Now the Distress ink does work better. It doesn't have that chalkiness that the Distress Oxide does. So when I'm doing a night sky, I tend to lean towards the Distress ink as opposed to the Oxide. And then I go over it again with that prized ribbon. I think it gives it kind of like that midnight blue feel. And I like the way that it adds the darkness for the appearance of night, and but yet it blends beautifully together. I'll distress or add some water to the top of my panel so that I get that nice oxidation, and then I'll use some silver watercolor paint to add some more splatters, and finally I'm going to add some white gouache over the top of that, and this really gives me a nice blustery night for Santa to travel on Christmas Eve. I've really been addicted to these Arches dies. I really think that they're a nice addition to my shape for my frames. and I thought that when I saw them that it would make a perfect snow globe at Christmas, and I really was happy with the way that this shaker card turned out. I need to add that moon glow to the top of my card, so I am cutting out just that sliver of moon, and I'll color it up with a little bit of the fossilized amber. In order to get the glow, I'll add a little bit to that background that I created. The edges are going to be a little bit rough, and so I do end up smoothing that out, as you'll see in just a moment, using my fingers. So the Distress Oxide ink does stay wet a little bit longer, and that made it easy for me just to blend it out with my finger and get that nice glow. Remember, I am going to have that frame around the outside edge, so as you see this little sliver showing, the sky showing behind the sliver of the moon, I'm not worried about that because I do know that the edge of my shaker card is going to cover that up. As I mentioned, I did color my pieces off camera. So this is the country shed with Snowman. I am going to add the little rock, I guess it's the side of the shed. I'm going to add that to the right side, and then I'm going to build some of my scene on the outside. As I mentioned, this is going to give a little bit more dimension. I have the tall pine tree from the Birch and Pine Trees. I'll use a brown marker, Copic marker down the center, and then I'm going to use a few shades of green to this pine tree. You'll notice that I'm not doing any precise coloring. I'm just adding flicks of color to the pine tree. I will add a darker color to the center because where the center of the pine tree would be, it would be a little bit darker than where the moon glow is going to touch those tips of the pine needles. So I'll blend it out one more time once I get this darker color down with my light color, and then I'm going to place this behind the fence. So for the fence, I did not glue it down completely. I added a very light coat of glue so that I could easily lift it up, and then I can add that tree back behind it, and we'll start adding our shaker pieces. For my shaker pieces, I went with kind of they're a little bit white, but they're also clear sequins in the pack. This is an older pack that I had from Pretty Pink Posh. I really like the shimmer that was in them. I wanted to get a nice layer of snow underneath this shed, so using those clear pieces, and then of course I'll bring in some of the distressed glitter, is going to help me to achieve that. So these are from Pretty Pink Posh. These are from Crescent Creation. There's some clear seed beads. And then this is the Distress Crystal, I think it's called, something like that. I'm going to add a little bit of that glitter, and we're going to put this back into the Misti, remove the release paper, and try to align this perfectly. I am terrible at aligning things, but this I found is the easiest way for me to do that. So I'm going to try to get this butted up. I'll use a little bit of wet glue. I thought about placing it down, and then I thought, you know what, I better use a little bit of wet glue in case I need to move something. So I went ahead and did that. I still got it, it still didn't align perfectly, so I did have to do a little bit of trimming, but I'm going to show you, because when you do create a shaker card like this, you are going to have a space showing on the sides where the double-sided foam adhesive is. You can see my rough cutting right there, but I'm going to clean this up with this silver cording. So I'm going all around the edge with the silver cording, and that will clean up this panel. And I like that added detail. You certainly could tie it at the top, and this would be a cute little ornament, but of course, as I mentioned, I am making this a card, so I do have that scored arch that I cut earlier, and that's going to go on the back of this card. I'll shake this in just a moment, and you're going to see how that snow gathers at the bottom, and it really does help complete the scene and give it that true snow globe appearance. So this is a really blustery night, as I mentioned before. Because I am using acetate on the front of this, I do need to add something over the top of this snowman so that it stays in place. You can see that it moves. So I'm going to set this glitter on top while I'm working on my Nordic Santa and reindeer. I did put most of it together off camera, but I did forget to put the antlers onto my little reindeer, and that's an important feature for him. So I'll add those antlers, and then I'm going to add the reins between Santa and the reindeer. I think that the CottageCutz dies go together so beautifully. As you can see, I used the Country Shed, which was from last year's release, and it went perfectly with the scene that I'm using today. When I create with the CottageCutz dies, for me personally, because it is a solid die, I do like to cut them out of white cardstock. Some people add adhesive to the back of the cardstock before they do their die cutting. I like to, I think I have a little bit more control for myself because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't get things glued perfectly all the time. So I like adding the wet glue myself. It just works better for me. And when I do my coloring, I add it to like a Cricut mat, and that helps keep the images down and in place. When I do adhere the Santa and the reindeer, it is going to be touching the edge of my shaker card, so the white frame, and that's going to help keep things in place. So if you're wondering, I don't think I put anything on top of the Santa and the reindeer because it does have that, because it is adhered to the edge of the frame, it does stay in place much easier than some of the other pieces. But you can see right here how adding some of the images to the inside and some to the outside really gives this snow globe that added dimension, and I liked the way that this actually turned out. Because I have that scoring on the second arch, solid arch that I cut out, it did allow me to just glue it to the back, and I can open the card. I added a sentiment to the inside instead of the outside, and that completed my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think of my card, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks for watching.